Hello, Mixmay here. If you watched the last vlog, you know how I said if someone's being bigoted in any form, abuse isn't that far behind, and that I give the talk on anti-fatness its own video? This is the one that puts them both together. Honestly, this relays a lot of what many other people have been saying multiple times in the past, but I also want to mention not just my experiences dealing with anti-fatness, but others I've met who had it much worse as well. Because it's disturbing when hatred for others drives people enough to do horrendous things in their lives. And it's really bad when hatred of fat people and the consequences of said hate are not talked about enough. So let's start. To get on the same page, fatphobia, fat hatred, anti-fatness, whatever you want to call it, is a form of bigotry we could never avoid, even when we were babies. Whether it's because our family talked about fat bodies badly around us, or we watched it from growing up with various movies, video games, TV shows. We believe pretty quickly that being big or fat is associated with being bad, or being a joke. Fat becomes a bad word, an insult to make fun of others, and fat people are assumed to eat unhealthy foods all the time, or their personalities all center around food. But it doesn't stop there. Health classes in school, when we watch the news, talking about the O epidemic, when we scroll through social media, we're now also a disease, not human, a burden, lazy. Gaining weight makes you a bad person, something to be feared, while losing weight makes you a good person, something to strive for. All these little things stack up, affecting how we interact with the world around us. Family members, our classmates in school, work colleagues, even strangers we come across. And of course, it affects our relationship with our own bodies and the relationship we have with food, even how we talk about them. To my understanding, there's a term that encapsulates all of that, the mere exposure effect. The more we are exposed to the repetitiveness of seeing fat people as bad, as a joke, not human, to that end, weight gain as well, the more we believe this true. And over those years growing up, while we learn about right from wrong from various other scenarios, we don't explicitly learn that hating or making fun of fat people is wrong. So we believe it's normal behavior, and to that end, being hateful is normal. And as we get older, we're given a reason by society as to why hating fat people is justifiable. Quote unquote, it's about health. Eventually, fat jokes about bodies turn into healthist jokes that target unhealthy foods, guilting fat people when they eat those foods, and then at worst, condemning fat people and wishing suffering or death upon them. At the core of all this, we learn and believe that it's okay to hate fat people because they're not human. And because society, social platforms, workplaces don't take it seriously enough, that also incites people to keep doing it, regardless of the harm they're causing to others. And when you start believing it's okay to be abusive here, and that you can't get in trouble for it, how much more can you get away with elsewhere? Especially in a time where abuse is normalized more and more. It turns into unhinged behavior. That's what choosing to dehumanize others for their bodies and encouraging hatred of fat people does. It's a gateway to anyone becoming abusive. It doesn't matter if you're a good, big or a fat person who eats right and exercises, or you're the complete opposite. It doesn't matter if you're a kid, teenager or adult. Anyone can be at the target of fat hatred or be the ones to encourage it. And chances are, this may sound familiar if you've been in a time or environment where other forms of bigotry were encouraged, making others victims of it seem not human as well, without being told that, hey, this isn't okay. Across the years, I met plenty of people of various ages who were fatphobic that eventually ended up being abusive in other forms as well. Let me give a few. A former friend who I called out for various problematic behaviors, including fat shaming a bad person, went to spread lies about me to mutual friends out of resentment, attempting to divide us when I cut them off. One person who made a heart attack and a canned comment when shaming someone's monster drink addiction turned out to be a manipulator to friends and partners alike, playing victim consistently. 3 other people I've known who, in their own way, made clear they were fatphobic, were known to harass minors online, 2 of them pedophiles. The list goes on, and it's better to realize this sooner than later in your own lives too, the connection between anyone being fatphobic and then abusive otherwise, because it's no coincidence how many other times I've seen this happen in the past. Because when being called out for being fatphobic, they resort to the same tactics abusers do to avoid being accountable for their behaviors. Deflecting, saying I'm too sensitive, they make excuses insisting it's for a good reason, or that it's a joke, playing the victim and driving the narrative to others, basically lying so that I sound like a bully, or otherwise attacking me as a person. And chances are, those guilty of those behaviors will still do this attempting to shut this video down or just cancel me. They're that predictable. One of the problems I've seen over the years as well is when some people make justifications hating fat people as okay when it's related to those who have done bad things, as if they quote-unquote deserve it or they have it coming. Donald Trump for the things he's doing in America currently. Lizzo, to my understanding, for the allegations of what she had done. Even other fat people who have a bad lifestyle or might be part of a kink like fetism are automatically deemed deserving of being fat-shamed, because it's like doubling down on harassing people who fit the stereotypes we believe from either fiction or society. And when you encourage others to have this same mindset, you encourage bigotry, you encourage hurting other people, you start giving people a valid excuse to become abusive. It's not okay. If someone's doing something bad, you can condemn them without needing to be a bigot or abusive about it. And it's unnecessary to comment on a random person's lifestyle, regardless of their body. Because in the end, openly being fatphobic, even if you're targeting just one person, gives the implication this is also what you think of other fat people as well, even if they are your friends or family members, maybe even a partner. It's also why you cannot fight fire with fire if you're calling out someone's bigotry. If someone fat shames you, you shouldn't fat shame them back, not just because of the implications, but you're also stooping to their level. Because of my identity as a perceived cis boy or man, no one but my family and some friends made fun of me or shamed me when I gained weight in high school. Honestly, I gained weight because I wanted to pursue a hedonistic lifestyle, because I didn't think with all that went on in my personal life at the time, I wouldn't have a purpose in life. So, I dabbled in fetism for a long time, which is essentially fetishized weight gain. To be clear, I don't encourage the fetism lifestyle to anyone, but I don't condone it either. I believe that if people want to lose weight in this world, that's fine. But if people want to gain weight, that's okay too. But in either case, we shouldn't force or peer pressure to do one or the other. And either way, objectifying bodies and to that end people isn't okay. I'll leave it at that. What had me speak out against fatphobia, however, was my travels online and hearing that a lot of teenagers and adults alike are facing it in more brutal ways in their own lives than I could ever imagine, which I'll talk about in a bit. And that's when I realized I wanted to speak out on it, to address that fat hate isn't okay, knowing how severe the consequences can be. So when I did, others I met over the years started having troubles with me, because again, how normalized this hatred is, so as much as raising awareness of it or calling people out on their behaviors is causing drama and making people walk on eggshells. All of the struggles of fat hate many of the people I spoke to dealt with mostly came from either their own family, high school, or both. One told me they starved themselves to a point of passing out multiple times to conform and not be bullied anymore. I remember them telling me they were even suicidal over the pressure of being thin from home and high school. Another was at the whim of having photos taken of them in public to be made fun of. They told me this over voice call, including how their family were part of the problem, making them feel ashamed for being fat as well. And I still remember them crying, recollecting what happened as it was literally traumatic for them. I'm pretty sure one of them, one of the earliest people I met during my time online, is dead, because their school was hopeless in terms of doing anything to stop the harassment they were facing. What they all had in common was, on top of having to deal with fat hate, they were also dealing with another form of abuse from the perpetrators as well. Two dealt with other forms of bullying, one of them dealt with domestic violence. And it proves that point that if either teenagers or adults are being fatphobic and getting away with it, they're also believing that they will get away with other abusive behaviors too. And the most terrifying thing is that they're not the only ones who are victims of fat hate at a young age. If you're not convinced still that, at its worst, fat hate kills, look up Gina's score. She died in a boot camp because she collapsed on the ground and the adults around her thought she was faking it, so they made fun of her as she was dying. And the hate doesn't stop when we're adults. There are experiences others online have put out there that have been at the whim of anti-fatness on a systematic level. That some people can't get work because employers judge their bodies, how doctors neglected their patients because of their weight and overlooked said patients having tumors growing inside of them until it was almost too late. At its worst, some fat people's deaths are made fun of, like how one fat activist supposedly died from choking on a sandwich. The list once again goes on, and it really makes you wonder if not just us as individuals, but society as a whole are okay if hatred is on that level. Again, there's an epidemic that makes fat people be seen as not human. And again, fat hate that isn't called out enough turns into unhinged and disturbing behavior. And it's worse that those considered average or straight-sized are also affected by fat hate because of that obsession society has with thinness, even worse when they're kids or teenagers. As it goes online as well, there are the mix of teenagers and adults hating fat people in an unhinged way. During my time in VR chat, I've seen groups like I Tickle Fat Kids they represent. Some have thrown games over seeing my avatar you see in the past vlogs, and its variants I wore in the past. Other places online, I've seen fat shaming comments of various forms, from fat shaming 101 remarks to death threats. And it really goes to wonder, if this is how they're acting online, how are they acting in their own personal lives around others? And it's why every single platform needs to take reports relating to fat hatred seriously, when at the heart of everything, it's hate speech. It's behaviors that really fuck with lives. It's that step leading those perpetrators into being abusive in other ways, either online or outside the internet. Yet all of the platform's reporting systems don't take anything relating to hating fat people as a serious offense. And given the rampant bigotry, it's understandable yet not okay why you don't see bigger or fat avatars or artworks represented because of the harassment people face. But for me, I wore my avatar you saw in the vlogs and some variants one person from VR chat made for me in the past because I didn't feel like anything else would suit me during my travels online. To that end, even before I got into VR chat, I had commissioned artists from various places that also helped me discover myself, who I wanted to be, and eventually became the basis of what you saw in the VR vlogs. And wearing this avatar helped me overcome my social anxiety more during my time in VR chat. Some others genuinely felt better about their own bodies from just seeing that avatar out there publicly, where you don't see fat avatars worn enough. I didn't care what the haters were thinking. I was me, and I was happy. That's why positive representation of fat people and characters out there is important. It can empower other bigger or fat people out there to see themselves as the hero of their own story, and more than the negative stereotypes society throws at us. Whether it's through drawings, stories where our protagonist is fat, where fat characters are seen with happy endings. Even in existing media, if you can mod a game so an existing 3D model of a thin character is fat, or did the same when creating arts or stories, it can make a big difference in someone's life. However, the main problem still stands. We don't take fat hatred seriously enough as an issue, because the ratio between how often we encourage hatred towards fat people and viewing us negatively compared to how much we encourage kindness and viewing us positively is very drastic. Again, when everyone lets anti-fatness slide, when it's something anyone can get away with, when it drives someone's ego, makes someone obsessed over condemning fat people for whatever reason, even wishing death upon them, knowing well where they can get away with it, it becomes unhinged, disturbing behavior. It doesn't matter if you're a teenager, or that you have body insecurities, or you struggle with mental health, or if you genuinely believe someone deserves to be fat shamed for the bad they've done. That does not excuse behaviors that can fucking kill someone. And it's worse when, going back to an earlier point, online platforms and even workplaces don't take it seriously enough. And I want to talk about two experiences where I saw it the worst in these cases, because you cannot claim to advocate for a safe workspace or community if you're letting fat hate slide. In my very first job, it sucked so much because I was at the whim of toxic colleagues who didn't care that their fat jokes made me uncomfortable to a point I wanted to leave. And my bosses couldn't do anything to stop them acting that way. One of those colleagues outright admitted to me that they kept doing it because they knew they couldn't get in trouble when I tried reporting them. But so as much as I stood up for myself, I got in trouble instead. The characters here of being inconsiderate, abusive even, showed later on when the same perpetrators did something that could have got us all in trouble at work as well, and still refused to avoid accountability for what they did. And one time from VR chat, I did wear a fat avatar from the Finis community in another community that centers around mental health, somewhat. And simply because I called out someone's fat shaming comment, they went on a witch hunt to drive a narrative to make me sound like some horrible person to everyone else present while acting like the victim. And they used the NSFW toggles on the avatar I never even touched as a gotcha to justify being hateful. Even when here I was in the wrong because I should have switched my avatar as NSFW was against this community's rules, fat hate blew things out of proportion. The mod I spoke to didn't take what I said seriously, even when the perp was still actively encouraging hatred of fat people in the community just by targeting me. And it makes clear that it was never about the fact the avatar war was inappropriate, as bigots do, they just want an excuse to hate fat people. Because the same could have happened if I wore another avatar the same size that didn't have anything problematic with it, and no one would bat an eye if I wore a thin avatar that had NSFW features. And this is what I referred to in the last vlog actually. If anyone understood the nature of a community relating to mental health they are a part of, they would be kinder in their approach. They would ask me to switch my avatar instead of slandering me, and own up to their hateful comments. They would reinforce their rules instead of making fat hatred an exception or justifiable behavior. But they didn't, because hatred and biases cloud people's judgment. In both the workplace and community experiences, I might be able to take handling fat hatred a little better compared to some others as an adult, but what about the next teenager, kid or adult? It doesn't have to be the specific workplace or community or people I met, but what if there was someone that would fall into an eating disorder because they heard all the things I had to put up with? What if they end up dead because of the harassment with little to no support from anyone around them? Behaviors driven by fat hatred that, after acting it out, the perpetrators don't believe they have blood on their hands because they're convinced what they're doing is okay when it absolutely isn't. It's abuse, straight up. And for a workplace or community to let those behaviors slide makes them complicit in enabling abuse as well. And for all the talk about people's health, because that's often, if not always, the excuse to justify hating fat people, if we cared enough, we would not be malicious in our approach to encourage healthy lifestyles. We would understand that hate, guilt, shame, and fear-mongering isn't the answer, that pushing weight loss isn't the answer, and that for some people, weight loss will never be the answer. But on top of society's encouragement of hating fat people, we also have other influences encouraging other abusive behaviors as well. And being abusive and stressing people out doesn't benefit anyone's health at all. And letting abusive behavior slide, like again, in a workplace or community environment, even at home, doesn't help at all either. Given everything I said, if you understand by now how bad hatred of fat people can get, we need to shame people more for being openly fatphobic, much the same as we should do with those being openly bigoted otherwise. The more we let hatred go unspoken, the more we're going to believe it's okay to do. We have to realize that the hatred doesn't stop at just fat people. We already know in the world that there's bigotry running rampant that also kills or threatens lives as well, that societies are encouraging. Disabled people, trans people, black and brown people, anyone else not perceived as normal. The more identities you come under that aren't perceived as normal, the worse the abuse gets. That's why you can't exclude fat people when we advocate for human rights. It's why we can't go down the rabbit hole playing comparison games with bigotry on who has it worse. Because if our goal in the world is equity, not equality, equity, everyone needs to be free from bigotry, not just advocating for it when it's convenient for you. And on top of shaming individuals, we have to also start addressing the problem on media and its communities that also let fat hatred slide or seem normalized, especially the ones that kids and teenagers get into. The influence from these media because of fat characters being depicted negatively, or the ways characters talk about food or calories like it's normal is disturbing. Then the communities are going to be another thing altogether if we let similar behaviors, fat hatred of jokes, mentioning calories and weight loss unnecessarily, slide as well. Because again, this is where it starts. Kids and teenagers becoming toxic, potentially abusive, and not being told these behaviors are wrong by anybody. And knowing that again, people I've known have been at the whim of toxic teenagers and adults to a point of self-harm where the abuse is driven by fat hatred, you need to take their behaviors more seriously, especially having seen plenty from my travels in VR chat. Because again, me personally facing it is one thing, but what about the next person? On that note, it's important as well to think about how we deal with kids and teenagers acting bigoted to their peers, especially in a time where, in the context of anti-fatness, it's not taken seriously enough. They're minors, they're a marginalised group. It would be on the parents more than anything, if not also the teachers if they go to school, to guide them and tell them fat shaming isn't okay. If kids and teenagers who are victims of fat shaming are in a place where they can tell their parents and teachers about dealing with it at school, and there can be consequences on the perpetrators, that's great. But if their problems are dismissed or invalidated instead, it's important to acknowledge that it's understandable if they have to address fat shaming by more questionable means. There's only so much peaceful approaches can do to stop someone from acting out on behaviors that are, as mentioned, abusive, especially when we live in a society where it's normalized and not taken seriously enough. However, one thing I stand firm on is not fighting fat shaming with more fat shaming, or other forms of bigotry. It's harder in an online space because of the fact that, as mentioned earlier, platforms don't take fat hate seriously enough to be deemed as a reportable offense, unless they've also been abusive in other ways as well. But otherwise, the least we can do is block and mute the ones making us uncomfortable. And for the fellow adults, if we are witnessing anti-fatness spoken by kids and teenagers, we do need to call it out as well. Obviously, a big nudge on the parents, family relatives, and teachers who may be watching this, but also others who may be around teenagers and kids for any reason. Because again, whatever you may think of fat people or otherwise kids and teenagers generally, you need to think about how horrible it would be for a minor to face fat hatred to a point they're alone all the time, facing abuse every day or so often, starving themselves or self-harming. To let bullying slide like that makes you part of the problem as well. If I hadn't made it clear enough in this video already, fatphobia isn't about mere body shaming. It's about the fact that society encourages this on a higher level when fat people are called a disease or epidemic, when media throw the same stereotypes multiple times to a point we believe it's true, when it affects us landing work, how we're treated at the doctors, our friendships or relationships. The fact that essentially behaviors driven by fat hate is abuse that, at its worst, because of how much people don't take it seriously enough, takes lives. That the need and obsession to be thin is much more important than to ever be healthy. That spaces that are supposedly meant to be safe for everyone don't consider fat people, either on a personal or professional level. More embarrassing when those spaces focus on mental health. That even kids are acting this way. That when I have called out anti-fatness over the years, people have misinterpreted what I said, believing that I must hate thin people or that I'm encouraging an unhealthy lifestyle, basically lying because it's easier to discredit me as a fat person, and that the concept of treating fat people like decent human beings sound absurd. Some people have spoke out against fat hate in various other forms in the past, way better than I ever could, got harassed off the internet. Again, unhinged, disturbing behavior that we believe is normal, when it's clearly not. To emphasize an earlier point to wrap this video up, when I've called out people's behaviors over the years, how they react is all I needed to know to understand whether or not they're trustworthy. Not just in the context of fat hate, but other abusive behaviors too. Any response I've gotten that hasn't been, sorry, I'll do better next time, or along those lines is a red flag. It's had me catch out family members, friends, crushes, a lot of people online. Because even if I was being nasty getting my point across, which usually involves guilting and shaming them for being ignorant, abusive, or bigoted, even if I'm the least qualified person to talk about whatever topic I do, if they do what abusers do, reflect, invalidate, attack, play victim, make excuses, I know not to trust them in the future. That's what I would like you to take from this video, especially in the context of fat hate. If you're going to call out someone's abusive or bigoted behavior, especially if it's someone you're close with, do not forget how they react. As mentioned before, the ones guilty of hating fat people will probably do the same if this video ever spreads, because them refusing to admit what they did was wrong is all you need to know to really think about if you should pursue your relationship or friendship with them in the future, because you don't deserve someone who's unwilling to change from their abusive behaviors. You deserve better. Much the same, if someone you confide to justifies the behavior of the abuser in question, you need to contemplate your connection with them as well. That's all I mentioned for this video on this topic. It's a lot to digest, and if you haven't realized until this video that hating fat people isn't okay, give yourself some time to process it. Unlearning hatred we've learned since childhood will take time, because it's one thing if you were guilty of acting in a bigoted way in the past. I was like that too. It's another thing if we try to unlearn it and strive to be better in the future. And for me as a person and for this channel, I'll always strive to encourage kindness as best as possible, while also affirming that calling out abuse and bigotry is okay too, provided that you don't stoop to the perpetrator's level. I'd like to share some positive advice in the midst of this video being very dark given the reality we live in, but honestly, it's pretty difficult when I haven't been in the shoes of others who had it much worse. But I believe one of the things we should try to do is take back the word fat from bullies, because if we use fat as a positive word to empower ourselves because it's okay to be fat, it would really throw haters for a loop. Yeah, I'm fat, so what? There's nothing wrong with that. Positive affirmations to ourselves and our bodies. But I think someone much better than me can guide you through liberating yourself in that way in a world that doesn't want you to. Being a rebel is cool, actually. Also, there's a guide from Octopath I found a few years ago that helps some others I met overcome their eating insecurities that might help you too. I'll put it in the description. In the meantime though, take care, make sure you eat and drink enough, take meds if any, and until next time. Bye!